Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make the dough for our sourdough bread that we'll hopefully be able to eat tomorrow night. And then we're going to make a Cajun Shrimp grilled cheese. So we're going to start out with our sourdough dough. This is, if you've never made sourdough before, it takes several hours to make it. It's not something, oh, I want sourdough today. It takes like a whole day and then some to make a sourdough thing if you have an active starter. If you don't even have the starter yet, you won't be eating sourdough bread for at least a week and a half. But we're going to start out with my basic plain Jane sourdough, but it's easy and delicious. So I'm going to put my bowl on my scale and I'm going to make it go to 0 on grams. And we're going to add 100 grams of active starter. So for your starter to be active, you can see has a nice bubbly at the top. It just means you fed it within the last 8 hours. So I fed mine earlier this morning. And so it has nice bubbly fermentation going on. And let me tar that because we want it to be 0. And then we're going to add 100 grams of starter. So my bowl's kind of big, so almost. Just a little bit more. Close enough. So that, and then I'm gonna tare it and make it go back to 0. And we want to add 375 grams of warm water. Warm water is the key because it really helps the flour absorb, the water. So we're going to add 375 grams. I'm just going to go over here so I can see my scale. Here's 100, 183, 303, 330. 375 on the dot. Look at that, perfect. So 375 grams of warm water. And then I am just going to take my dough whisk and I'm going to mix my starter into my warm water. This will allow it to incorporate into the flour really well. So we're gonna just mix it up. It doesn't take much to mix it. There we go. Now we are going to measure out 500 grams of flour. So put my bowl on. And I'm using unbleached bread flour. You always want to use unbleached flour when you're making sourdough because it has the living organisms in it that help the fermentation process. So I want 500 grams of flour, which is about 3.5 cups. So I'm just gonna start with some big scoops. We're at 444. A little bit. Perfect. 502. Good enough. So I have my 500 grams of flour, and then I'm going to add in, it's about 10 grams of salt, but I just kind of eye it. It's about 2 teaspoons of salt. So I just give 2 good pinches. And now give it a little stir. We're ready to add our flour and salt mixture to our starter and warm water. I'm using, this is a Danish whisk or a dough whisk. It's actually really good to incorporate. It works much better than a wooden spoon. Get all the flour in there. And I'm just gonna use my dough whisk to incorporate it. I highly recommend getting one of these dough whisks if you're going to be doing sourdough. It is so much easier to incorporate it without over mixing. So I'm going to just, there we go, incorporate it. Your dough is going to be sticky to begin with. But for the next 2 hours, we're going to be folding it every 20 to 30 minutes. And it will absorb, the flour will absorb more and more of the water and it will become less sticky. So don't freak out if it's a bit, you feel like, oh, it's sticking to me, it's too much. So we're using my dough whisk here. And I'm just making sure I've combined all of that flour in there, and I have no secret flour pockets. So we've got our dough whisk. There we go. So now we are done with this. We're gonna let it sit, and then I'm gonna show you the folding technique in a little bit when we are done making our grilled cheese. Because the folding is really important to prevent getting huge bubbles in your sourdough. Okay, let's start with we had some leftover shrimpies from our Super Bowl party. So I'm not one to let things go to waste. So we are going to make some Cajun grilled cheese sandwiches today. So I'm gonna turn my burner to high. And I'm gonna put a little bit of olive oil in here. And then once that warms up, we're gonna add our shrimp in, and then we'll pull it out, and then we'll make our little Cajun sauce with it. So I'm gonna cut up a little bit of a yellow onion. You don't need much for it. So I'm just gonna take off a small piece, and then I'm gonna take off this skin, the outer skin, and we're gonna do a nice fine mince on it because we don't want it to, we don't want very big chunks. We want a fine mince about a little bit bigger than a garlic mince. So nice and fine. There we go. So I did a lot of really, if you can see, very thin slices. And now I'm gonna go the opposite direction, and we're gonna cut it nice and thin and over. And then I will go over roughly. So we've got these things. I'm gonna go over roughly over it all, just because we want a fine mince on it. Because you think when you're sandwich, you don't want to have a big chunk of onion. You want to have a nice mellow. There we go. So we've got our onions. Okay, I think our oil should be hot now. Put it around. I'm gonna give. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna put in each shrimp, but I'm gonna pull off their tails because you don't want to have a tail in your thing. But these are just leftover from our charcuterie board. We had a shrimp ring. So they're pre-cooked cocktail shrimp, but they work just fine for re-cooking up. Let's see. And really we're just sauteing them to get a nice little crispy edge on them. There's a tail, but they are already cooked all the way through. If you are using raw shrimp, you'll want to make sure you cook them all the way through. Raw shrimp are gray when you get them, so you would cook them until they turn pink. And one last one. Get my hands up, quick wash. Okay. So we have our little shrimpies here. Alright. Very nice, very nice. And we're just getting a nice little browning sear on each little shrimpy. So they have a nice, delicious flavor. Got a bowl to move them. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle them with just a little bit of Creole seasoning. This is Tony Chachere's. Just a little bit to have a little seasoning. We're gonna have some more spices in our sauce. So not much, but a little. And the thing with shrimp is they saute up very quickly. So that's one thing, is it's a pretty fast meal to make. There we go. But you do want that nice browning on them. Good. Flip these guys over. We've got some nice brown edges on them. Perfect. I'm going to turn my heat off, and I'm going to add them over here and reserve them because I like them to keep their little crispness to them. I'm going to add a touch more oil, and then we're going to add in our minced onions here. And we're going to let them saute, and we're going to add in some minced garlic as well. So So I'm going to use about a teaspoon of minced garlic, which is, if you want to use fresh garlic, it's about 1 clove. There we go. And we'll give it a good stir. Get some of those shrimp drippings off the bottom of our pan, which will add a nice little flavor as well to it. There we go. And now, while these are caramelizing up, I'm going to chop up 1 small tomato, or a fresh tomato here. This is just going to add a little bit of body to our sauce that we're going to toss our shrimp in. We don't need very much, just a little bit. And I'm going to kind of do a small chop on it. I'm going to slice through. There we go. If you find that your tomatoes are hard to cut through, it's because your knife is not sharp enough. So just sharpen it up with a honing steel. And once you can easily cut through your tomato skins, that's when you know it's nice and sharp. Knives, I feel like my knife goes dull about every other week. I'll give it a little sharpen up, just because I use it a lot. But if you're one of those people who throw their knives in the dishwasher, which is kind of like a no-no, but you know what? People do it. You'll need to sharpen it more frequently because dishwasher dulls your blade. But you always want to make sure you have a nice sharp knife, because dull knives are where you're going to get injured in the kitchen. You're more likely to slip when you're cutting and cut yourself. Okay, I'm going to add in this chopped up tomato. We're going to give it a good stir with our onions and our garlic. There we go. I'll lower my heat down just a little bit. There we go. Very nice. And then we're going to mince up some parsley. This is about I want to say a teaspoon or so of fresh parsley. We're going to mince it up fine and add it in there. We'll just add a little freshness to our sauce. But I want to make sure I don't have any big leafy pieces, so just a really fine mince up over it. There we go. And we're going to add this in there as well. We're going to give it a good stir. And we're going to let them simmer for a little bit. I'm going to toss in just a bit of more of the Choni Chachere's Creole seasoning, but you could use any Cajun seasoning you wanted. And just sprinkle it over. You're going to about a half a teaspoon. You don't want too much because there is salt in here. And then I'm going to add in some smoked paprika. About a half a teaspoon. You don't need too much, but enough to give it a nice flavor. And we're going to stir it and we're going to let it cook and simmer for just a minute. It has a lovely smell because the paprika is very fragrant. Okay, I'm going to turn that down to low. We'll add a dash of cream in there in a little bit, but let's prep our bread for our next piece. So I'm going to move this over here since we're done with that. I'll clear that. Now we are going to get our bread ready. I have just a little bit of our homemade sourdough left, not enough to make 2 sandwiches, so I'm going to have to use some store-bought sourdough as well. But I'm going to get our seasonings out of the way. I'm going to cut up some slices. I'm hoping to get 3 out of here, but you still want them to have nice good. So I can get 3, and then I just need to borrow 1 slice. So I was hoping to start my bread last night, but it was just crazy busy, and so we didn't get to it, and that's why I had to refeed it early this morning, my starter. But at least we have our bread going now. Give it a good turn. And now we're going to just butter one side of each piece of bread, and that's what's going to be going down on the skillet so that it crisps up nicely. Put that over here. will be the top to that one. And butter it nicely. And this bread right here is the same recipe that we are making. Give it a nice spread of butter. Perfect. And then I'm using Havarti and Munster cheeses. I feel like the lighter colored cheeses pair really well with the Cajun seasoning. It helps kind of mellow them out. So I'll do Havarti on the bottom and Munster on the top. And I'm just gonna turn my skillet to about a 6 to have it start warming up as we layer our cheeses. And the trick is you don't want your cheese to overflow your piece of bread, otherwise it will just melt and burn to the skillet, which then can get on your bread and leave a burnt flavor. So I always it's more like a jigsaw puzzle, making sure it just fits there nicely without overcrowding. Perfect. Okay, we have that on there. We are gonna add just a toss, or just a dash of cream to our, not much because you don't want it to run into our chipotle.
You got a question? Is sourdough bread better for you?
They say that it's good for your gut. It has prebiotics or probiotics in it. It has like the lactic bacteria, but it's fermented, and fermented foods typically are better for your gut health. And I just think it tastes better. So we've added a splash of cream to ours. Now we are going to toss in our shrimp and coat them in this yummy sauce, which we made out for those joints. So minced onions and garlic, sauteed in olive oil with 1 fresh tomato chopped up, a little bit of smoked paprika, and then Cajun seasoning, and a dash of cream. Okay, we've got those all stirred up, so I'm gonna spoon them onto our prepared grilled cheese. And this is the nice thing about it is we didn't have enough shrimp to do anything with for a real meal, but it's enough to make these delicious Cajun grilled cheese sandwiches. There we go. And then I really love the sauce, so I'm gonna put a lot of sauce on mine. There we go. So we have that up, and now we're gonna put a layer of Munster on, and get it going. Okay. So again, you wanna make sure your cheese is not gonna overflow onto the skillet, otherwise it will just end up burning. There we go. Little patch. And there we go. Now we'll layer it with our other slice of bread. Perfect. And I have my skillet heating up. While that is heating up, and before we do our next toss, I am gonna get I love this. I use a fish spatula for flipping them. I'm gonna show you our first fold into on our bread. So what I like to do in the very beginning is just sprinkle a little bit of flour over the top of it. And then also on my hands, because it is a little bit sticky the first time. But this is really crucial that you do the fold, because it gets rid of the big bubbles in your sourdough. So you kind of pull it up and fold it over. 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 And you just kind of do that like 4 or 5 times. And you really want to get the big pull out, and then you fold it back over, and then you're going to let it sit for another 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll do the fold again. You do that 4 times, and then you let it sit for about 4 to 6 hours until it's doubled in size. And then you will put it in, you will shape it, you'll put it in your banneton, which is like a cloth line bread bowl. and you pop it in your fridge, and you need to refrigerate it for 24 hours, or give or take that, because that gives you the big spring. If you're new to sourdough baking, I do have a sourdough kit in my store. It has literally the banneton. It has, I think, the jar to make it, the whisk. It has like all the fancy tools, which are nice for beginners, because you really do use all of them. And they make it so much easier. Okay, let's see if this is ready for its first flip. Good. And then we'll do it one more flip to get a nice golden color on each side, but I want to make sure my cheese melts. So we're doing our first one. While we are waiting, we are going to, I'm going to feed my starter just a little bit. Anytime I discard and take stuff out to make a bread, I'm going to feed it to replace the bulk amount that I have. But instead of using bread flour, I'm going to use unbleached all-purpose flour, because it's a little bit cheaper and easier to get. So let me grab that out of my pantry. For making the bread and like the starter, I'm more exact. But my feeding process, I just kind of add give and take and what I have space for in my bowl. It's not exact. I typically do around 6 to 7 tablespoons, but if I still have a full lot, I'm just gonna do probably, and I fed it earlier this morning, I'm gonna do about 3 more tablespoons of flour with 3 tablespoons of water, just to replace the amount and let it kind of ferment. I use a lot of sourdough discard recipes, which are delicious, but that kind of goes through my bulk period.
Why don't you go through some of the stuff you made in the past couple weeks with the discard?
So I made, we get a flip, we'll do our second flip. So yesterday I made cranberry orange scones with the sourdough discard. And then we made zucchini muffins with the sourdough discards. We made lemon scones with the sourdough discard, biscuits, crackers, waffles, yes, waffles with the sourdough discard. I have a pancake recipe with the sourdough discard. It's like anything. I made pasta with it.
You got a question? Do you do this instead of yeast for sourdough?
Yes, so sourdough does not use any yeast. It has the natural fermentation from it ferments on the counter, and that's what causes it to rise. So it doesn't use any yeast, and it rises on its own. It's crazy. It's science, you know what I mean? It's the fermentation and the gases causes it to spread out versus like a yeast, which is, derived from wheat. So I've got 3 tablespoons of unbleached all-purpose flour in here, and now I'm going to add in 3 tablespoons of water. And get a measuring cup. Just use this for it. You want to do half and half with your flour and your water when you're feeding it, and just get a little bit because they weren't completely full. We'll give that a stir in 1 second, but I think these are about ready to flip. Beautiful. Look at that nice golden crust on that one, which is what we love. And then we'll finish those grilled cheese off. I'm going to stir my flour and my water into it. And this is what's going to keep the fermentation process active in your starter. You need to feed it, if you're making bread, you have to feed it at least around 6 hours before you use it. If you're using it for discard recipes, that's just, you'll take what out from when you're feeding it. But it doesn't have to be an active starter. It can go on your countertop 2 to 3 days without feeding. Or in your refrigerator, it can go about a week or so without feeding. Okay. I think we are about ready for these things. I'm going to put I have this little cheesecloth that goes over it. It's great. I think it's also in the kit as well. Beautiful. Beautiful. These are ready. Let's see. Nice golden color. Okay. Turn my skillet off. Let's get a plate. Cut into these Cajun Shrimp grilled cheeses. So this one's my husband's, and this one is mine. And I'm gonna cut into mine. So we're just gonna cut through. Oh, look at that. It's so, you can just see the cheese has such a good melt on it. Look at that pull. I'm gonna take a big bite now. Lobster shrimp. Delicious. The Cajun, sorry, pairs really well with the Havarti and the Munster. They're such a creamy cheese that it cuts through the spice on it. Well, guys, we are done here. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live shows every single day. Feel free to comment if you want us to try out a certain recipe in the future. Again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.